Single mother Rebecca Martinez shocked everyone when she used her last $300 to buy an abandoned 50-acre farm in rural Nebraska at a tax auction. But what happened next left archaeologists, historians, and the entire scientific community in disbelief. Hidden beneath the crumbling farmhouse floor was a discovery that would rewrite Native American history and transform not just her family's desperate situation, but our understanding of ancient civilizations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The November wind cut through the threadbare jacket Rebecca Martinez wore as she stood at the edge of what locals called the cursed property in Millfield County, Nebraska. At 34, Rebecca had the tired eyes of someone who'd been fighting life's battles alone for too long. Her 8-year-old daughter Sophia clutched her hand, while 12-year-old Marcus kicked at the frozen dirt, his skepticism written all over his face. "Mom, this place looks like it's about to collapse," Marcus said, gesturing toward the sagging farmhouse that hadn't seen proper maintenance in decades. "Are you sure about this?" Rebecca adjusted the worn backpack containing everything valuable she owned. Exactly $347 in cash, their important documents, and 3 peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. The property had been abandoned for 15 years after the previous owner died with no heirs, leaving the county to seize it for unpaid taxes. Everyone said the land was worthless, plagued by flooding problems, and too remote for modern farming. "Sometimes the things everyone else gives up on are exactly what we need," Rebecca replied, though her voice betrayed her own uncertainty. She'd driven 3 hours from their cramped studio apartment in Omaha after seeing the tax auction notice online. The minimum bid was $300, exactly what she could afford after cashing in her last remaining asset, her ex-husband's old guitar. Sophia tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing toward a partially collapsed red barn. "Look, Mom, there's still some chickens here." Indeed, a small flock of feral chickens had made the abandoned property their home, pecking around the debris. Rebecca smiled despite their circumstances. At least there were signs of life in this desolate place. The auction was scheduled for noon, and as Rebecca walked the perimeter of the property, she tried to imagine how they could possibly make this work. The farmhouse needed everything: a new roof, windows, plumbing, electrical work. The barn was beyond saving, but something about the place called to her, perhaps the way the old cottonwood trees had grown into protective barriers around the house, or the small creek that ran along the eastern boundary, still babbling despite the autumn.
"Freeze!"
"Mrs. Martinez," a voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see a heavy-set man in overalls approaching. "I'm Dale Thompson, neighbor from about 2 miles east. Heard you might be interested in the old Hendrick place." Rebecca nodded cautiously, just looking around before the auction. Dale's expression grew serious. "Ma'am, I don't mean to discourage you, but this land's been nothing but trouble. The Hendricks tried for 40 years to make something of it. Good people, mind you, but the flooding in spring takes out whatever you plant, and in summer the creek runs dry. There's a reason it's going for the minimum bid." "Thank you for the warning," Rebecca said firmly. "But I'm not planning to farm it. I just need a place for my children to call home." Dale studied her worn clothing and determined expression, seeming to understand more than she'd said. "Well, if you do buy it, remember that Millfield folks believe in helping neighbors. You'll have friends if you need them." As noon approached, Rebecca was surprised to find only 3 other bidders at the courthouse steps. The auctioneer, a tired-looking county clerk, seemed eager to get through the proceedings quickly. "We're here for the tax auction of the Hendrick. Property, 50 acres with structures, parcel number 47B. Bidding starts at $300. Rebecca raised her hand, her heart pounding. An elderly man in a suit immediately countered with $325. Another bidder, apparently interested in the timber rights, went to $350. Rebecca's stomach sank. She'd calculated wrong. She hadn't accounted for the buyer's premium and fees. At $350, she was already priced out. But then something unexpected happened. The elderly man approached the other bidder, and they had a brief conversation. Both men walked away, shaking their heads. "Do I have $350? The auctioneer called out, looking confused. "Going once, going twice." "300!" Rebecca called out desperately, hoping the original minimum still applied. The auctioneer paused, consulted his paperwork and nodded. $300 from the lady in the blue jacket. Any other bidders? He waited the required time. Sold for $300. Rebecca's knees nearly buckled with relief. Only later did she learn that the two men had discovered the property was landlocked, accessible only through a narrow easement that required crossing private land. The timber rights were valueless if logs couldn't be transported out. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 2 weeks later, Rebecca stood in the doorway of what was now their farmhouse, still hardly believing it was theirs. The moving truck had been a neighbor with a pickup who helped transport their few belongings in exchange for Rebecca cleaning his house. Their furniture consisted of 3 air mattresses, a card table, and folding chairs from a garage sale. "It's so quiet here," Sophia whispered, as if afraid to disturb the stillness. It was quiet. No traffic, no sirens, no neighbors fighting through thin apartment walls. Just the wind through the cottonwoods and the distant call of a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. Marcus had been sullen during the move, angry about leaving his friends in Omaha and what he saw as another of his mother's crazy decisions. But now, exploring the property, Rebecca could see his natural curiosity taking over. He'd found an old root cellar behind the house and was examining its stone construction with interest. "Mom, come look at this," he called. "These stones don't look like regular rocks. They're all carved and fitted together without mortar." Rebecca joined him at the root cellar entrance. Marcus was right. The stonework was unusually sophisticated, with each stone precisely cut to fit its neighbors. She'd expected typical prairie farmhouse construction, but this looked almost ancient. "Maybe the original owners were just really good builders," she suggested, though something about the stones nagged at her. They reminded her of pictures she'd seen in Sophia's history books. Their first month was a continuous struggle. Rebecca had found work as a night shift cleaner at the county hospital, leaving the children alone more than she liked, but bringing in enough to buy groceries and basic supplies. They heated the house with wood from the property's dead trees, cooked on a camping stove, and bathed with water heated in pots on the kitchen's old wood-burning stove. Dale Thompson proved as good as his word, appearing regularly with fresh vegetables, milk from his cows, and helpful advice. His wife brought homemade bread and cookies that made Sophia's eyes light up. Other neighbors followed suit, a community Rebecca hadn't expected to find in such a remote area. "You're tougher than most city folk," Dale observed one afternoon, as he helped Rebecca patch a hole in the roof. "But I still think you're crazy for trying to winter here with those kids." "Probably," Rebecca agreed, hammering a makeshift shingle into place. "But crazy's better than hopeless. In the city, everything cost more than I could make. Here, at least I own something." The children adapted differently to their new life. Sophia thrived, spending hours exploring, naming the chickens, and collecting interesting rocks and artifacts she found scattered around the property. Marcus initially resented everything about their situation, but gradually found purpose in helping, with repairs and taking responsibility for maintaining their generator. It was Sophia who made the discovery that would change everything. On a cold December morning, while Rebecca was at work and Marcus watched Sophia, the 8-year-old was playing in the farmhouse cellar. Not the stone root cellar outside, but a smaller basement under the kitchen. She'd been using her flashlight to examine the stone walls, pretending to be an archaeologist, like in her favorite TV show. "Marcus," she called excitedly. "There's a funny stone down here that wiggles." Marcus, engrossed in a book, initially ignored her. "Sophia, stop playing and come upstairs. Mom said to stay together." "But it has pictures on it, like the ones in my history book." Something in her voice made Marcus put down his book and grab the flashlight. In the cellar, Sophia showed him a stone about knee-high that seemed slightly loose in the wall. When pressed, it moved inward about an inch. "Weird," Marcus muttered, examining it more carefully. The stone face was indeed carved with symbols. Not random scratches, but deliberate markings that looked like stylized animals and geometric patterns. Together, they managed to work the stone completely free, revealing a hollow space behind it. Sophia shined her flashlight inside and gasped. "Marcus, there's stuff in here, lots of stuff." The hollow space, about the size of a large suitcase, contained what appeared to be ancient pottery, carved items made of stone and bone, and other artifacts unlike anything they'd seen. But most striking was a large flat stone covered with intricate carvings. "We have to tell Mom," Marcus said, his voice hushed with awe. "Should we take them out?" Sophia asked. "No," Marcus said firmly, demonstrating wisdom beyond his years. "Don't touch anything else. Mom needs to see this exactly like we found it." When Rebecca returned from her shift at 7 a.m., exhausted and looking forward to a few hours of sleep, she found her children wide awake and bursting with excitement. "Mom, you have to see what Sophia found," Marcus exclaimed, pulling her toward the cellar stairs. "Can't it wait? I'm really tired." "No, Mom, this is huge," Marcus insisted. "We found something incredible." In the cellar, as Rebecca examined the hidden chamber and its contents by flashlight, she felt her exhaustion evaporate. Even with no archaeological training, she could see these artifacts were genuine and old. Very old. "We didn't touch anything except that one stone," Marcus assured her. "You did exactly right," Rebecca said, her mind racing. "We need to call someone. These need to be properly excavated and studied." "Who do we call about something like this?" Sophia asked. Rebecca thought for a moment. "I think we start with the university. Someone there will know what to do." The call to the University of Nebraska's anthropology department changed everything. Dr. Sarah Blackhorse, a specialist in Great Plains archaeology, arrived that same afternoon with a small team of graduate students. What she saw in that cellar made her immediately contact the state archaeologist's office and the National Park Service. "Mrs. Martinez," Dr. Blackhorse said, barely able to contain her excitement, "I believe you've stumbled upon the most significant archaeological find in Nebraska history. These artifacts appear to be from the woodland period, possibly dating back over 1,000 years. But there's something unusual here. The construction techniques and some of these symbols don't match anything we've seen from regional cultures." "What does that mean?" Rebecca asked. "It means," Dr. Blackhorse replied, "that this site might completely change our understanding of prehistoric settlement patterns in the Great Plains. Your property could be sitting on top of an ancient village site that represents a previously unknown culture or a significant trade center connecting distant civilizations." Within days, Rebecca's quiet farmhouse became the center of intense archaeological activity. Teams of researchers, graduate students, and volunteers carefully excavated the cellar and began systematic surveys of the entire property. They found evidence of extensive underground structures, pottery fragments, tools, and most remarkably, carved stones with symbols that seemed to blend elements from multiple Native American cultures across a vast geographic area. The state archaeologist, Dr. Robert Stans Tall, himself of Lakota heritage, was particularly intrigued by the symbolic carvings. These markings suggest contact between groups we previously thought never interacted. If our initial dating is correct, this site could represent a crossroads where different peoples met for trade, ceremony, or cultural exchange. News of the discovery spread rapidly through academic circles and then to major media outlets. Suddenly, Rebecca found herself fielding calls from National Geographic, the History Channel, and newspapers from around the world. The property she'd bought for $300 because no one else wanted it was now being called one of the most important archaeological sites in North America. But with attention came complications. The state of Nebraska moved quickly to designate the site as a protected archaeological area, which meant certain restrictions on development, but also potential compensation and preservation grants. Native American tribes from across the region claimed cultural connection to the site and requested involvement in its study and preservation. More challenging were the legal questions. Did Rebecca own the artifacts found on her property? Could development be restricted without compensation? Multiple parties, the state, federal government, various tribal nations, and academic institutions, all claimed interest in the site. "I never wanted to get rich off this," Rebecca told Dr. Blackhorse during one of many meetings with lawyers and government officials. "I just wanted a home for my children. But I also don't want to lose what we've built here." The solution, when it came, was more generous than Rebecca had dared hope. The federal government offered to purchase a conservation easement on the war property, paying Rebecca $8 million, while allowing her family to remain in the farmhouse as site caretakers. The state matched federal funds to establish the Millfield Cultural Center, providing Rebecca with a good job as site manager and her children with educational opportunities they could never have imagined. A year after Sophia discovered the loose stone, Rebecca stood in the same spot where she'd first examined the property as a desperate single mother with $300 to her name. But now, instead of abandoned farmland, she saw a carefully excavated archaeological site with visitor facilities, research buildings, and educational programs that brought thousands of people to rural Nebraska each year. Marcus, now 13, had developed a passion for both archaeology and photography, documenting the excavation process and learning about the ancient cultures connected to their land. Sophia, 9, served as an unofficial junior guide, charming visitors with her knowledge of the site and her role in its discovery. "Do you ever regret buying this place?" Dr. Blackhorse asked during a recent visit. Rebecca smiled, watching her children help researchers carefully clean newly discovered pottery fragments. "How can I regret the best mistake I ever made? I thought I was buying a broken-down farm. Instead, I bought a window into history and a future I never could have imagined." The Millfield site continued revealing secrets. Ground-penetrating radar suggested more underground structures across the property. Carbon dating confirmed the site's age at over 1,200 years, with evidence of continuous occupation across multiple cultures. Most surprisingly, DNA analysis of organic materials suggested genetic connections to peoples from as far away as Mexico and the Ohio River Valley, indicating this remote Nebraska farmland had once been a major hub of ancient commerce and cultural exchange. Local schools now brought students to learn hands-on archaeology. Universities from across North America sent researchers and students for summer field schools. The economic impact transformed Millfield County, bringing new businesses, improved infrastructure, and opportunities for local youth to engage with science and history. Dale Thompson, the neighbor who'd first warned Rebecca about the worthless land, now operated a successful bed and breakfast for visiting researchers and tourists. "Guess I was wrong about this place being cursed," he admitted with a laugh. "Turns out it was blessed all along, just waiting for the right person to see it." Rebecca had framed the original tax auction notice and hung it in the farmhouse kitchen, a reminder that sometimes life's greatest opportunities come disguised as desperate choices. The woman who'd bought 50 acres for $300 because she had Nowhere Else to Go had become a nationally recognized advocate for cultural preservation and rural archaeology. But perhaps the most significant transformation was in Rebecca herself. The desperate single mother who'd felt like a failure for losing everything in Omaha had discovered that failure sometimes just means you're being redirected towards something better. She'd sought shelter and found purpose. She'd wanted survival and found significance. As archaeologists continued their painstaking work, each new discovery added another chapter to the story of the ancient peoples who had called this land home long before any European had seen the Great Plains. But for Rebecca and her children, the most important discovery was that home isn't just a place you find. Sometimes it's a place that finds you when you're brave enough to bet everything on the impossible. The cursed farm that nobody wanted had become one of America's most important archaeological sites, all because a single mother with $300 and nowhere else to turn had the courage to see possibility where others saw only problems. It was proof that the most extraordinary discoveries often begin with the most ordinary people doing what seems like the most foolish thing. Dr. Sarah Blackhorse arrived at the Millfield site on a crisp January morning, carrying news that would transform everything once again. As she walked past the temporary research stations now dotting the property, she found Rebecca in the makeshift laboratory they'd set up in the old barn, carefully cataloguing pottery fragments with Sophia. "Rebecca, we need to talk," Dr. Blackhorse said, her voice carrying an excitement barely contained beneath professional composure. "The results from the University of Arizona's Advanced Dating Lab just came in, and they're extraordinary." Rebecca looked up from the pottery shard she'd been examining. Over the past 6 months, she'd learned to read the archaeologist's expressions, and this one suggested something momentous. The carbon dating confirms what we suspected, but the thermoluminescence testing on the ceramics revealed something unprecedented, Dr. Blackhorse continued, pulling out a thick folder of laboratory reports. "This site wasn't just occupied for a few hundred years, as we initially thought. We're looking at continuous human presence spanning over 2,000 years, with the most sophisticated period occurring around 800 AD. Sophia dropped her brush and stared wide-eyed. 2,000 years? That means people were living here when the pyramids were built. Actually, Sophia, the pyramids are much older. Dr. Blackhorse smiled. But yes, this land has been home to people for an incredibly long time. What's more fascinating is the evidence of technological advancement. The metallurgy found in some artifacts suggests these people had developed techniques we didn't think existed in North America until European contact." Marcus appeared in the doorway, drawn by the conversation. Now 14 and having grown several inches over the winter, he moved with new confidence born from months of working alongside professional archaeologists. "Dr. Blackhorse, does this change the significance of our site?" "Marcus, it doesn't just change it, it revolutionizes it. We've found evidence of copper working that rivals anything from the Great Lakes region, agricultural terracing that shows these people transformed the landscape in sustainable ways, and most remarkably, astronomical alignments that suggest mathematical knowledge we haven't seen elsewhere in the Great Plains." Rebecca set down her tools, feeling that familiar mixture of awe and responsibility that had become her constant companion. Each new discovery seemed to add weight to the legacy entrusted to their family. "What does this mean for us practically?" she asked. "The federal designation, the research grants." "It means everything is about to expand dramatically," Dr. Blackhorse replied. "The National Science Foundation wants to establish a permanent research center here. 3 universities are proposing to create a joint graduate program focused on this site, and the Smithsonian Institution is requesting to partner with us for a major exhibition." The implications were staggering. Rebecca had gone from worrying about paying for groceries to managing one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in recent history. But more than the financial security or professional recognition, what struck her most was the profound sense of stewardship she felt for the ancient stories being unearthed. "There's something else," Dr. Blackhorse added, her tone becoming more serious. "We've received a communication from Dr. Maria Solis at the University of Mexico City. Some of the symbols we've documented here match ones found at sites in central Mexico. She's requesting permission to visit and compare our findings with her research on pre-Columbian trade networks." The international attention was both thrilling and overwhelming. Rebecca had never imagined owning a small farm would connect her family to a global community of scholars and researchers. Yet as she watched Sophia carefully brush dirt from a piece of ancient pottery, she realized this was exactly the kind of purposeful life she'd always hoped to provide for her children. One where learning wasn't confined to classrooms, but lived and breathed in their daily experience. Dr. Robert Stans Tall arrived that afternoon with representatives from 5 different Native American tribes, including the Ponca, Pawnee, Lakota, Santee Sioux, and Winnebago nations. The meeting was held in the farmhouse kitchen, now serving as an informal conference room for the constant stream of visitors. "The elders from our tribes have been in council," Dr. Stans Tall began, his weathered face serious but kind. "This site speaks to all of us, but in different ways. The symbols, the pottery styles, the burial practices, they suggest this was a place where many peoples came together." Rebecca poured coffee for everyone, a ritual that had become central to these important conversations. "What are you seeing that we might be missing?" Elder Mary White Elk of the Ponca Nation spoke up, her voice carrying the authority of her 87 years. "Your daughter found something our ancestors wanted future generations to discover, the way the cache was hidden, the care taken to preserve these items. This wasn't an accident. Someone knew that one day, when the time was right, these stories would need to be told again." The weight of this perspective settled over the room. Rebecca felt a deep connection to the unnamed ancient people who had carefully preserved their culture in the stone chamber Sophia had discovered. Perhaps they had somehow known that their legacy would need patient guardians. "We would like to propose something," continued Dr. Stans Tall. "A formal partnership where tribal historians work alongside academic archaeologists, not as subjects of study, but as equal partners in interpreting these findings." This collaboration proved to be transformative. Traditional ecological knowledge provided insights that purely academic approaches had missed. Tribal linguists identified patterns in the carved symbols that connected to ancient oral traditions. Most importantly, the partnership ensured that the site would be studied with cultural sensitivity and respect for native heritage. Rebecca found herself at the center of these negotiations, her role evolving from property owner to cultural mediator. The skills she'd developed as a single mother, patience, creativity in solving problems with limited resources, and the ability to bring different personalities together proved invaluable in managing the complex relationships between federal agencies, universities, and tribal nations. Spring brought new revelations as the ground thawed and excavation expanded. Ground-penetrating radar revealed the outlines of at least 12 underground chambers across the property, suggesting a vast complex that had only partially been explored. More intriguingly, the chambers appeared to be connected by tunnels, indicating sophisticated underground architecture. "This isn't just a village site or a ceremonial center," Dr. Blackhorse explained to a gathering of researchers and tribal representatives. "We're looking at what might be the most complex prehistoric urban planning ever discovered in the Great Plains. These people engineered an underground city, Marcus had become fascinated with the engineering aspects of the ancient construction. Working with Dr. Jennifer Wu, a specialist in prehistoric architecture from MIT, he'd created detailed 3D models of the underground structures using photogrammetry software. "Look at this ventilation system," Marcus pointed out during a presentation. To visiting students from the University of Nebraska, they designed air circulation that would have kept the underground spaces comfortable year-round. This level of planning suggests they weren't just living here, they were thriving here. Sophia's interests had evolved too. Now working closely with Dr. Angela Crow-Feather, a tribal historian and archaeologist, she'd become particularly interested in the artistic and spiritual aspects of the artifacts. Her natural curiosity and lack of academic preconceptions often led to insights that amazed the professional researchers. "Look how these animal figures face different directions depending on where they're positioned in the chamber," Sophia observed during a documentation session. "It's like they're telling a story as you move around the room." Dr. Crow-Feather nodded approvingly. "Sophia, you're seeing what our ancestors intended. These weren't just decorations, they were teaching tools, maps, calendars, and spiritual guides all combined into one artistic expression." The summer brought the official opening of the Millfield Archaeological Research Center, a state-of-the-art facility built on the property with funding from the National Science Foundation, the Nebraska state government, and private donors. The center included laboratories, classrooms, dormitories for visiting researchers, and a public education facility that had already welcomed over 10,000 visitors. Rebecca stood before the crowd gathered for the dedication ceremony, feeling the surreal nature of her transformation. 18 months ago, she'd been cleaning hospital floors at night and worrying about making rent. Now she was director of an internationally recognized research center, about to address an audience that included the governor of Nebraska, tribal leaders, university presidents, and media from around the world. "When my daughter Sophia found that loose stone in our cellar," Rebecca began, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd, "she wasn't just discovering ancient artifacts. She was uncovering proof that this land has always been a place where different peoples came together to share knowledge, trade goods, and build something greater than any one group could create alone." She paused, looking at her children sitting in the front row, both beaming with pride and excitement about the future. The ancient people who lived here understood something we're only beginning to rediscover: that diversity makes us stronger, that preservation and progress can coexist, and that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we're brave enough to look beneath the surface of what everyone else has dismissed. The applause was warm and sustained, but Rebecca felt most proud of the nods of approval from the tribal elders who had become not just partners in the research, but mentors to her family. Dr. Maria Solis from Mexico arrived in August with a team of specialists in Mesoamerican archaeology. Her examination of the carved symbols led to perhaps the most startling discovery yet. "These markings," she explained to the assembled researchers, pointing to photographs of symbols found throughout the site, "they're not unique to your location. We found identical or nearly identical symbols at sites throughout Mexico, Central America, and even South America. This suggests a trade network or cultural exchange system spanning the entire continent." The implications were staggering. The isolated Nebraska farmland had been part of a continental communication system that predated European contact by centuries. The artifact suggested exchange not just of goods, but of ideas, technologies, and artistic traditions across thousands of miles. "We're talking about rewriting the textbooks," Dr. Solis continued. "The level of organization required for this kind of long-distance cultural exchange suggests prehistoric American civilizations were far more sophisticated and interconnected than we ever imagined." Rebecca found herself thinking often about The anonymous ancient people who had created this legacy. What had motivated them to preserve their culture so carefully? What challenges had they faced? How had they managed to maintain connections across such vast distances? The personal impact on her family continued to amaze her. Marcus had been accepted into Stanford's early admission program with a full scholarship, planning to study archaeology and computer science. Sophia was thriving in the local school's new Native American Studies program, one of several educational initiatives sparked by the site's discovery. But perhaps most meaningful was the sense of community that had grown around the site. Dale. Thompson's words about neighbors helping neighbors had proven prophetic. The research center had brought jobs to the county, attracted new businesses, and created opportunities for local young people to engage with science and history in ways previously unimaginable. The autumn brought news of another significant development. The site had been selected for nomination as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognition that would place it among the world's most important cultural treasures like Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, and the Great Wall of China. This designation would ensure protection and funding for generations, Dr. Blackhorse explained during a community meeting. But it also means accepting international oversight and tourism on a scale we haven't experienced yet. The community response was thoughtful, rather than simply enthusiastic. Residents had seen how the site's discovery had already transformed their county, bringing benefits but also challenges. Traffic had increased dramatically, putting strain on rural roads. Housing costs had risen as researchers and support staff moved to the area. The balance between preservation, research, and community life required constant attention. Rebecca found herself at the center of these discussions, her perspective valued because she understood both the life-changing benefits and the daily challenges of managing such significant attention. Her ability to work with diverse groups, federal officials, tribal leaders, international researchers, and local farmers, had made her an effective advocate for balanced development. Change doesn't have to mean losing who we are, she addressed the packed community center. The ancient people who lived here managed to maintain their identity while participating in a vast network of relationships. We can do the same. Growth that honors our values and includes our community in the benefits is possible, but it requires all of us to stay engaged and work together. Winter brought a period of reflection and consolidation. The major excavations paused due to weather, but analysis of findings continued in the new laboratories. Rebecca used this time to complete a degree in museum studies through the University of Nebraska's distance learning program, preparing herself to better serve in her role as center director. The evenings were often spent in the farmhouse kitchen, still the heart of their home despite all the changes. Sophia would do homework while Marcus worked on college applications and scholarship essays. Dr. Blackhorse often joined them for dinner, having become like family over the months of shared discovery. You know what I find most remarkable about this whole experience? Dr. Blackhorse mused one evening as they cleared dishes. It's not just the archaeological significance or the rewriting of textbooks. It's watching a family transform along with a community and a field of study. You've all grown into roles you never expected, and you've done it with such grace. Rebecca smiled, remembering the desperate woman who'd bid $300 on a worthless farm. I think desperation can be a gift if you're willing to see it that way. When you have nothing left to lose, you can take risks that lead to everything you never knew you wanted. Sophia looked up from her history book. Mom, do you think the people who hid these things knew someone like us would find them? I think, Rebecca replied thoughtfully. They hoped that whoever found their legacy would understand its value and protect it for future generations. In a way, we're links in a chain that connects the past to the future. Marcus added, and the coolest part is we're not just preserving what they left. We're adding our own chapter to the story. The research center, the partnerships with tribes, the educational programs, all of that becomes part of the site's history too. As spring returned for the second time since Sophia's discovery, Rebecca stood in the same spot where she'd first examined the property as a desperate single mother. The landscape had been transformed, not just by archaeological excavation, but by the careful development of a research campus that honored both ancient heritage and modern needs. Visitors from around the world came to study the site, but also to learn about the successful model of community university tribal partnership that had emerged. Rebecca regularly spoke at conferences about cultural preservation and community engagement, sharing lessons learned from their unique experience. The property that no one had wanted for $300 had become priceless, not just in monetary terms, but as a bridge between past and future, a place where ancient wisdom informed modern understanding, and where a family's desperate bid for survival had uncovered treasures that belonged to all humanity. Dr. Stan's Tall's words echoed in Rebecca's mind as she watched her children leading a group of visiting students through the site. The elders had been right. Sophia hadn't just found artifacts. She discovered a responsibility that would shape generations, a legacy that connected their small family to an ancient story still being written. The woman who'd bought a broken-down farm with her last $300 had found something far more valuable than land or even archaeological treasures. She'd found purpose, community, and proof that sometimes the most meaningful discoveries happen when you're brave enough to bet everything on the impossible, trusting that even in desperation, the future might hold wonders beyond imagination. The morning Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived from the Vatican's Pontifical Commission for Sacred Archaeology. Rebecca knew their world was about to change again. The Spanish archaeologist stepped out of her rental car with the purposeful stride of someone carrying momentous news, her expression a mixture of excitement and gravitas that had become familiar to Rebecca over the past 2 years. "Mrs. Martinez," Dr. Vasquez said, approaching the research center's main building where Rebecca was reviewing grant applications. "I need to speak with you privately about something extraordinary we've discovered in our analysis of the symbol sequences from Chamber 7. They walked to Rebecca's office, a space that had evolved from a corner of the farmhouse kitchen to a professional workspace overlooking the excavation sites. Through the window, Rebecca could see Marcus leading a team of graduate students in mapping newly discovered underground chambers, while Sophia worked with Dr. Crow Feather, documenting symbolic patterns found in the latest excavation. "Dr. Vasquez," Rebecca began, settling into her chair, "given your background with religious archaeological sites, I'm guessing this isn't about trade routes or agricultural practices." The archaeologist smiled, appreciating Rebecca's directness. "Indeed, what we've found suggests this site held spiritual significance far beyond anything we initially recognized. The symbol sequences aren't just decorative or even communicative in a simple sense. They appear to be astronomical calculations of extraordinary precision." She opened her laptop, displaying enhanced images of carved symbols from various chambers. "Working with astrophysicists from the European Space Agency, we've determined these carvings accurately predict solar and lunar eclipses, track planetary movements, and even account for the precession of equinoxes. The mathematical sophistication required suggests knowledge rivaling ancient Babylon or Mayan civilization." Rebecca leaned forward, studying the images. "You're saying the people who lived here were astronomers?" "More than that, these calculations extend far into the future and the past. They include predictions for astronomical events occurring in our current century. Mrs. Martinez, whoever created these, was thinking in terms of millennia, not decades or centuries." The implications sent a chill down Rebecca's spine. The ancient inhabitants hadn't just been preserving their culture. They'd been creating a message for the future, one that required advanced mathematical and astronomical knowledge to decode. "There's more," Dr. Vasquez continued. "The Vatican's archives contain references to similar symbol systems from early missionary reports in Central and South America. Father Miguel de Santos, writing in 1541, describes encountering indigenous peoples who possessed calendars that stretched beyond memory and could predict celestial events with uncanny accuracy." Rebecca stood and walked to the window, watching. Her children work alongside world-class researchers. "Dr. Vasquez, are you suggesting this site was part of some kind of prehistoric scientific network?" "I'm suggesting something more profound. What if these ancient peoples possessed a unified understanding of astronomy and mathematics that we're only beginning to rediscover? What if sites like yours were nodes in a continental knowledge-sharing system designed to preserve crucial information across centuries?" The afternoon brought an emergency gathering of the core research team: Dr. Blackhorse, Dr. Stans Tall, Dr. Crowfeather, Dr. Wu, representatives from 3 universities, and tribal council members assembled in the research center's main conference room. Rebecca found herself in the unusual position of chairing a meeting that would reshape their understanding of the site's purpose. "The astronomical calculations Dr. Vasquez has decoded aren't random observations," Dr. Blackhorse began after reviewing the findings. "They're specifically focused on celestial events that would have had profound implications for agriculture, navigation, and ceremonial timing across the Americas." Elder Henry Crow Dog of the Lakota Nation leaned forward. "Our oral traditions speak of star wisdom keepers, people responsible for maintaining the calendars and predicting the best times for planting, hunting, and ceremony. But these traditions suggest knowledge that was once more widespread and precise than what survived into the historical period." Marcus, now 16 and officially part of the research team despite his age, raised his hand. "Have we considered that this might not be just preservation, but active communication? What if these calculations were meant to be discovered precisely when humanity had developed the technology to verify their accuracy?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sophia, 14 and increasingly sophisticated in her understanding of the site, added, "Like they were leaving a message in a bottle, but one that could only be opened when we were ready to understand it." Dr. Wu nodded slowly. "The engineering of the underground chambers supports this theory. The ventilation systems weren't just for comfort. They maintained precise humidity and temperature controls that would preserve carved symbols for millennia. This was intentional long-term preservation." Rebecca felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "We're not just managing an archaeological site anymore. If these theories are correct, we're custodians of a prehistoric university, a library of knowledge that spans continents and centuries." The meeting concluded with plans for an unprecedented international collaboration. Teams from the Vatican, the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy, Harvard's Astronomy Department, and indigenous knowledge keepers from across the Americas would converge on the site to decode what Elder Crow Dog had begun calling the star messages. Over the following months, the farmhouse and research center buzzed with activity unlike anything they'd experienced. Dr. Kenji Nakamura arrived from Japan with quantum computing equipment to model the astronomical calculations. Dr. Sarah Running, Bear from the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian, brought traditional knowledge keepers whose oral histories contained fragments of what might be the same astronomical traditions encoded in the stones. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During a late-night session in the underground chambers, Sophia noticed that the carved symbols seemed to change their apparent arrangement depending on the angle of observation and the light source. "Dr. Vasquez," Sophia called excitedly, "bring your flashlight over here and shine it from different angles." As Dr. Vasquez moved her light source, the carved symbols appeared to shift and realign, creating different patterns and revealing previously hidden layers of meaning. "Parallax encoding," Dr. Nakamura breathed in amazement. They didn't just carve flat symbols, they created three-dimensional information systems that require specific viewing conditions to reveal their full meaning. This discovery revolutionized their approach to every carved surface in the underground complex. Using advanced photogrammetry and computational analysis, the team began uncovering layers of encoded information that had been invisible to standard archaeological documentation. "We're dealing with information architecture more sophisticated than anything we knew existed in prehistoric America," Dr. Wu announced during a press conference that drew international attention. These ancient people weren't just astronomers. They were information theorists, encoding multiple levels of meaning into permanent media. Rebecca watched the press conference from her office, marveling at how casually extraordinary discoveries had become part of their daily life. But what struck her most was the transformation in her children. Marcus had deferred his admission to Stanford to spend another year working on the site, his research on prehistoric information systems earning him co-authorship on papers with leading academics. Sophia had become the site's unofficial ambassador, her natural ability to explain complex concepts making her a favorite among visiting journalists and documentarians. The autumn brought another paradigm shift when Dr. Maria Solis returned with news from Central America. "We've found sister sites," she announced to the assembled research team. "Locations in Guatemala, Mexico, and Peru, with identical astronomical encoding systems. The network was even more extensive than we imagined." This revelation led to the establishment of the International Prehistoric Astronomy Consortium. Headquartered at the Millfield site, Rebecca found herself not just managing a single archaeological project, but coordinating a global research initiative that was rewriting the textbooks on prehistoric American civilizations. "Sometimes I feel like we're in a science fiction movie," Rebecca confided to Dr. Blackhorse during one of their regular evening walks around the property. "2.5 years ago, I was a single mother with no prospects, buying what everyone thought was worthless land. Now we're part of a discovery that's changing how we understand human history." Dr. Blackhorse smiled. "The land was never worthless, Rebecca. It was waiting for the right people at the right time. Your willingness to see potential where others saw only problems, that's what made this possible." Bloom. The winter months brought a new phase of research focused on practical applications of the ancient knowledge. Dr. Nakamura's team had successfully decoded astronomical predictions that extended into the next millennium, some of which had direct relevance for modern agricultural cycles and climate patterns. These calculations account for long-term climate variations with remarkable accuracy, Dr. Nakamura explained during a presentation to agricultural scientists from the USDA. The ancient peoples weren't just tracking celestial events, they were modeling their relationship to terrestrial conditions. This practical application of ancient knowledge attracted attention from environmental scientists and climate researchers. The site became a focal point for studying how traditional ecological knowledge could inform modern approaches to sustainable agriculture and climate adaptation. Rebecca established the Ancient Wisdom Initiative, a program that brought together indigenous knowledge keepers, climate scientists, and agricultural researchers to explore practical applications of the astronomical and agricultural information encoded in the site. "My ancestors knew things we're only beginning to understand," reflected Dr. Crowfeather during one of the initiative's workshops. They thought in cycles measured not in years, but in centuries. Their calculations weren't just about predicting astronomical events. They were about understanding Earth's rhythms and living in harmony with them. Spring brought the most significant discovery yet. Deep scanning of the underground complex revealed a central chamber that had remained undetected despite 2 years of intensive excavation. Located directly beneath the original farmhouse, the chamber required careful excavation through the basement where Sophia had made her initial discovery. Rebecca insisted that Sophia be present when they opened the sealed chamber. As the largest carved stone that had hidden the entrance was carefully removed, the team used fiber optic cameras to examine the interior before entering. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez, monitoring the camera feed. "It's enormous and completely intact." The chamber proved to be a hemispherical room, carved directly from bedrock, its walls covered with stellar maps that showed the night sky from different latitudes across the Americas. At the center stood a stone platform surrounded by intricate carvings that seemed to incorporate elements from every other chamber on the site. But it was the ceiling that took everyone's breath away. Instead of simple carved symbols, the entire dome was covered with inlaid metals, copper, silver, and what appeared to be meteoric iron, arranged in patterns that exactly matched the current night sky when viewed from the chamber's center. "This is a planetarium," Dr. Nakamura said in Wonder, a prehistoric planetarium that shows not just the local sky, but stellar views from across the Americas. The precision required to create this? Sophia stepped forward, her eyes wide with amazement. It's like they built a model of the universe underground. But why? Elder White Elk, now 89 and one of the most respected voices on the project, smiled. Because they wanted to make sure we never forgot that we're all connected to the stars, to the earth, to each other. This chamber isn't just about astronomy. It's about understanding our place in creation. The discovery of the central chamber attracted even more international attention. Teams of archaeoastronomers arrived from around the world to study what was being called the most sophisticated prehistoric astronomical installation ever discovered in the Americas. Rebecca found herself traveling to academic conferences, United Nations cultural preservation committees, and government hearings about protecting and studying the site. The woman who had bought a farm with her last $300 was now recognized as one of the world's leading advocates for indigenous knowledge preservation and community-centered archaeology. But despite all the accolades and opportunities, what mattered most to Rebecca was watching her children grow into young adults who understood their responsibility as custodians of something greater than themselves. Marcus had developed into a brilliant researcher, publishing papers on the mathematical principles underlying prehistoric astronomical calculations. His work bridged computer science and archaeology in ways that opened entirely new fields of study. Sophia had become the site's most effective interpreter, able to explain complex astronomical and archaeological concepts to visitors of all ages. Her natural charisma and deep understanding of the site's significance made her a sought-after speaker at schools and museums around the world. "You know what I've learned from all this?" Sophia said one evening as the family sat on the farmhouse porch, looking up at stars that seemed more meaningful now that they understood how carefully ancient peoples had studied them. "We're all just temporary custodians of knowledge. The people who built this place knew that. They preserved what they learned so it could survive, even if their civilization didn't." Marcus nodded. "And they trusted that someday people would come who would understand the value of what they preserved and carry it forward. That's exactly what happened with us." Rebecca looked at her children, then out at the research center, where lights still burned in laboratories where teams worked. around the clock to decode the remaining mysteries of the site. The underground chambers had revealed their secrets gradually, each discovery building on the last, each answer revealing new questions. "The most incredible thing," Rebecca mused, "is that none of this would have happened if we'd had more options. 2.5 years ago, if I'd had a good job, a nice apartment, financial security, we never would have ended up here. Sometimes the things that look like disasters are actually doorways to possibilities we never could have imagined." The key site continued to yield discoveries that challenged conventional understanding of prehistoric American civilizations. Each revelation strengthened the growing body of evidence that ancient peoples had possessed sophisticated knowledge systems and maintained continental networks of communication and cultural exchange. But for Rebecca, Marcus, and Sophia, the most important discovery wasn't archaeological. They had found their place in a story much larger than their individual lives, a story that connected them to the ancient past and to a future where the preservation of traditional knowledge would help humanity navigate the challenges ahead. The cursed farm that no one wanted had become a bridge between worlds, ancient and modern, indigenous and academic, local and global. It proved that sometimes the most valuable treasures are hidden beneath the surface of what everyone dismisses as worthless, waiting for someone brave enough or desperate enough to look deeper. As shooting stars streaked across the sky above the Nebraska prairie, Rebecca felt the profound satisfaction of knowing that the ancient star watchers who had once stood on this same ground would approve of what their legacy had become. The knowledge they had so carefully preserved was not only surviving, but thriving, inspiring new generations to look up at the night sky with wonder and understanding. The woman who had risked everything on a worthless piece of land had unlocked one of humanity's greatest treasures, proof that wisdom transcends time, that knowledge carefully preserved can bridge any gap between past and future, and that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries happen to the most ordinary people willing to see potential where others see only problems. The morning that changed everything began with an emergency call from Dr. Chen Wei-Ming at the Beijing Institute of Paleontology. Rebecca answered her phone at 5:47 a.m., already accustomed to international collaborations that ignored time zones. What she heard in Dr. Chen's voice, a mixture of disbelief, excitement, and urgency, made her instantly alert. "Rebecca, we've made a discovery in the Gobi Desert that directly relates to your site. We've found identical astronomical markers, but they're dated to 15,000 years ago. This isn't just a prehistoric American phenomenon. We're looking at evidence of global knowledge sharing that predates anything we thought possible." 3 days later, Dr. Chen arrived at Millfield with a team of Chinese archaeologists and a collection of artifacts that would shatter every assumption about the timeline of human civilization. As the researchers gathered in the central chamber, now converted into a high-tech analysis center, Dr. Chen displayed side-by-side images that left everyone speechless. "The astronomical calculations are identical," Dr. Chen explained. "Not similar, identical. The encoding methods, the precision of measurements, even the specific celestial events tracked. We're looking at knowledge that was somehow shared across continents 15,000 years ago." Dr. Nakamura's quantum analysis confirmed what visual inspection suggested. The mathematical principles underlying the Gobi petroglyphs were indistinguishable from those found at Millfield. But the implications were staggering. This level of knowledge sharing suggested either direct contact between peoples separated by vast distances or independent development of identical, extraordinarily sophisticated scientific methods. Rebecca watched Marcus and Sophia absorb this revelation with the adaptability that had become their hallmark. At 17, Marcus had already published papers on prehistoric mathematics that were revolutionizing archaeology. Sophia, now 15, had developed an intuitive understanding of the site's symbolic language that often surpassed that of professional researchers. "What if we're approaching this from the wrong angle?" Sophia suggested during a research team meeting. "Instead of asking how different civilizations could have developed identical knowledge, what if they were all part of one civilization, a global culture that we haven't recognized because we've been looking at individual sites instead of the whole network?" Dr. Blackhorse, who had become like a second mother to the children, smiled with pride. "Sophia, you've just articulated what some of us have been thinking but haven't dared to say. What if the boundaries we've drawn between ancient civilizations are artificial?" This hypothesis led to the formation of the Global Archaeological Concord, an unprecedented alliance of research institutions from 37 countries. The Millfield site became the coordination center for the largest archaeological investigation in human history, aimed at mapping what researchers began calling the Ancient Knowledge Network. Teams deployed to every continent, searching for sites that matched the Millfield astronomical encoding system. Within 6 months, identical markers had been found in Australia, Easter Island, the Andes, the Sahara Desert, and locations across Europe and Asia. Each discovery pushed back the timeline of sophisticated human civilization and strengthened evidence for a prehistoric global culture of unprecedented sophistication. Rebecca found herself at the center of this worldwide investigation, not just as the director of the original site, but as someone who understood the delicate balance between scientific discovery and cultural sensitivity. Her experience navigating relationships between federal agencies, tribal nations, academic institutions, and local communities had prepared her for the complex diplomacy required to coordinate international research efforts. "The responsibility we carry has grown beyond anything I could have imagined," Rebecca confided to Elder White Elk during one of their regular walks around the property. At 91, the elder moved more slowly, but still insisted on visiting the site weekly, claiming the ancient energies helped maintain his health. "The ancestors knew this day would come," Elder White Elk replied, pausing to rest beside the memorial garden that had been created to honor indigenous peoples whose knowledge had been lost to history. "They preserved their wisdom, knowing that eventually the world would be ready to understand it again. You were chosen to be the bridge between their world and ours." The autumn brought news that would dwarf all previous discoveries. Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Japanese Antarctic Research Expedition reported finding geometric patterns buried beneath ice sheets that had formed 12,000 years ago. When core samples revealed metallic inlays matching those found in the Millfield chambers, the scientific community was forced to confront the possibility that advanced human civilization was far older and more globally widespread than anyone had imagined. Rebecca flew to Japan to examine the Antarctic evidence personally. Standing in the Tokyo laboratory, looking at metal fragments that perfectly matched the astronomical markers from her farmhouse cellar, she felt the profound weight of human history reshaping itself around their discoveries. "Mrs. Martinez," Dr. Tanaka said, "these alloys shouldn't exist. The metallurgy required to create them wasn't supposed to be developed until the Bronze Age. Yet here they are, sealed in ice that formed when most of the world was still emerging from the last ice age." The implications were revolutionary. Either human technological development had been drastically misdated, or an advanced civilization had existed and vanished before recorded history began. The evidence was forcing archaeologists to completely reconsider the narrative of human progress. Marcus had been working with teams at MIT and Cambridge on AI analysis of the global pattern of ancient sites. His research revealed that the locations weren't random. They formed geometric patterns when mapped globally, patterns that aligned with magnetic field variations and geological stability zones. "Mom," Marcus explained during a family dinner that had become a weekly tradition despite their hectic schedules, the ancient knowledge keepers weren't just tracking stars. They were studying the Earth itself. Magnetic fields, tectonic activity, climate patterns. They chose locations for their knowledge centers based on criteria we're only beginning to understand. Sophia had been developing what she called the unified field theory of ancient knowledge, the idea that prehistoric peoples had developed an integrated understanding of astronomy, geology, mathematics, and consciousness that modern science was only now beginning to rediscover. What if the separation between science and spirituality is a modern invention? Sophia proposed during a lecture she'd been invited to give at Harvard. What if the ancient peoples saw them as aspects of the same unified understanding of reality? Her presentation, delivered to an audience of Nobel laureates and leading researchers, challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of knowledge itself. The video of her lecture went viral, earning Sophia recognition as one of the most innovative young thinkers of her generation. The winter brought the establishment of the Millfield Institute for Integrated Consciousness Studies, a research center dedicated to exploring the connections between ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science. The institute attracted researchers from fields as diverse as quantum physics, neuroscience, archaeology, and indigenous studies. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had become a close family friend and mentor to Sophia, established a fellowship program that brought young indigenous scholars to study at Millfield. "We're not just preserving ancient knowledge," she explained during the program's launch. "We're demonstrating that indigenous ways of knowing can contribute to humanity's most pressing challenges." The spring of their 4th year at the site brought an invitation that would take them full circle. The United Nations requested that Rebecca address the General Assembly about the implications of the global archaeological concord's findings for humanity's understanding of itself. Standing at the podium in New York, looking out at representatives from every nation on Earth, Rebecca felt the profound journey from desperate single mother to global advocate for cultural preservation and scientific discovery. 4 years ago, she began, my daughter found a loose stone in our farmhouse cellar. That simple discovery has revealed that our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we imagined, that human knowledge transcends the boundaries we've drawn between cultures and continents, and that the wisdom of the past can inform solutions to the challenges of the future. She spoke about the importance of preserving indigenous knowledge, the need for cooperation between traditional wisdom keepers and modern scientists, and the responsibility all humans share as temporary custodians of knowledge that belongs to everyone. The ancient people who preserved their wisdom in stone chambers around the globe trusted that future generations would understand its value. They were right. Their legacy teaches us that knowledge shared across boundaries becomes stronger, that diversity of thought creates resilience, and that the most important discoveries often come from the most unexpected places. The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes. But more importantly, her speech catalyzed the creation of the Global Heritage Preservation Compact, an international agreement protecting ancient knowledge sites and establishing protocols for studying them with cultural sensitivity and community involvement. Marcus delivered the commencement address at Stanford University, having completed his degree through distance learning while continuing his research at Millfield. His speech, titled "Standing on the Shoulders of Ancient Giants," challenged graduates to approach innovation with humility and respect for traditional knowledge. Sophia, now 16 and already accepted into MIT's early admission program, had chosen to take a gap year to complete a documentary about the global network of ancient sites. Her film, The Star Keepers, had already been acquired by major streaming platforms and educational distributors worldwide. The 5th anniversary of Sophia's discovery was marked by an international celebration that brought together researchers, tribal leaders, government officials, and community members from around the world. The Millfield site had become a symbol of what was possible when diverse perspectives collaborated with mutual respect and shared purpose. Rebecca stood on the same spot where she'd first examined the property as a desperate mother with $300, now surrounded by research facilities that had welcomed over 2 million visitors from every continent. The farm that no one wanted had become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a center for scientific breakthrough and a model for community-based cultural preservation. "You know what's most remarkable about all this?" Rebecca said during her remarks at the anniversary celebration. "The ancient peoples who preserved their knowledge here weren't just thinking about their own time or even their children's time. They were thinking about our time, centuries and millennia in the future. They trusted that someday someone would be ready to understand and continue their work." Dr. Blackhorse, now retired but still living in a cottage on the property, wiped away tears as Rebecca continued. They trusted enough to preserve their greatest treasures for a future they would never see. That trust created a bridge across time that connects us all, past, present, and future. As the celebration continued into the evening, with traditional dances from dozens of cultures performed under the same stars the ancient astronomers had studied, Rebecca reflected on the profound transformation that had occurred, not just in their understanding of human history, but in the lives of everyone touched by the discovery. Marcus had launched a non-profit organization dedicated to bringing archaeological and astronomical education to underserved communities. His work had established programs in 30 countries, making cutting-edge research accessible to young people who had previously been excluded from such opportunities. Sophia's documentary had sparked a global movement of young people interested in preserving cultural heritage and bridging traditional and modern knowledge systems. She was already developing her next project, a series examining how ancient wisdom could inform solutions to climate change. The research at Millfield continued, with new discoveries emerging regularly. The site had become a living laboratory where ancient knowledge informed modern research methods, where traditional and scientific approaches complemented each other, and where the wisdom of indigenous peoples was recognized as essential to understanding human history. But for Rebecca, the most important transformation was personal. The woman who had felt like a failure, who had bought a worthless farm with her last money as an act of desperation, had discovered that failure was sometimes just redirection toward a purpose greater than anything she could have imagined. The ancient star keepers understood something we're only beginning to learn, Rebecca said in her final remarks of the evening. True wealth isn't measured in gold or land, or even knowledge itself. It's measured in the legacy we leave, the bridges we build between past and future, and the trust we place in generations yet to come. As the celebration wound down and researchers from around the world prepared to return to their home institutions, Rebecca knew that the work would continue. In laboratories and classrooms, in tribal council meetings and UN assemblies, in the minds of children who would carry these discoveries into futures yet unimaginable. The cursed farm had become blessed ground, proof that sometimes the most extraordinary destinies emerge from the most ordinary circumstances, that wisdom can survive any catastrophe if carefully preserved, and that the most valuable discoveries often belong not to those who find them, but to all humanity. Standing beneath the star-filled Nebraska sky, Rebecca felt the presence of the ancient astronomers who had once stood on this same ground, mapping the heavens and encoding their knowledge for a future they trusted would come. Their faith had been rewarded beyond anything they could have imagined, and their legacy would continue to unfold for generations to come. The story that began with a single mother's last $300 and her daughter's curiosity about a loose stone had become a testament to the power of preservation, the importance of diverse perspectives, and the extraordinary possibilities that emerge when people are brave enough to see potential where others see only problems. In the end, Rebecca realized they hadn't just discovered an ancient civilization, they had become part of its continuing story, temporary custodians of wisdom that belonged to all time, carrying forward a legacy that connected the deepest past to the brightest possible future. The call came at dawn on a Tuesday morning in their 6th year at the site. Rebecca's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Dr. Amara Okafor, the newly appointed director of UNESCO's World Heritage Emergency Response Team. The message was brief, but ominous. Global crisis, your expertise needed immediately. Lives at stake. Within hours, Dr. Okafor arrived at Millfield, accompanied by officials from the United Nations, the World Bank, and representatives from 12 different countries. As they gathered in the research center's main conference room, the gravity of their expressions told Rebecca this wasn't about archaeological preservation. "We're facing an unprecedented ecological challenge," Dr. Okafor began, her Nigerian accent carrying the weight of urgency. "Climate models are showing accelerating changes that our current agricultural systems can't handle. Traditional farming methods are failing across multiple continents simultaneously. We're looking at potential food insecurity that could affect 3 billion people within the next decade." Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. What does this have to do with our archaeological work? Dr. James Mitchell, from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, leaned forward. "The astronomical and agricultural calculations your team has decoded aren't just historical curiosities. They predict climate patterns and agricultural cycles with precision that surpasses our most advanced computer models." Dr. Nakamura's analysis suggests the ancient knowledge keepers were tracking climate variations over thousands of years. Marcus, now 21 and holding a joint PhD in mathematics and archaeology, sat up straighter. "Are you saying the ancient calculations can predict current climate events?" "Not just predict them," Dr. Mitchell replied. "The encoded agricultural techniques suggest adaptive farming methods that could help us maintain food security despite climate change. The ancient peoples weren't just astronomers, they were climate scientists who developed sustainable agricultural practices for long-term environmental variation." Sophia, now 18 and fresh from completing her documentary series, spoke up with characteristic directness. "You want us to help save the world's food supply based on 1,000-year-old farming advice?" "That's exactly what we're asking," Dr. Okafor confirmed. "The traditional ecological knowledge preserved at sites like Millfield isn't just historically significant, it's potentially humanity's lifeline." The months that followed transformed Millfield from a research center into a global command post for agricultural resilience. Teams of climatologists, agricultural scientists, indigenous knowledge keepers, and sustainability experts converged on the site to decode the practical applications of the ancient astronomical calculations. Rebecca found herself coordinating the most complex international effort of her life. The woman who had once struggled to pay rent was now managing a project involving 47 countries, hundreds of researchers, and funding from organizations, ranging from tech billionaires to ancient tribal councils. Dr. Running Bear, who had become the site's senior indigenous knowledge advisor, worked with teams to translate the ancient agricultural techniques into modern applications. Our ancestors encoded instructions for farming in harmony with natural cycles, she explained during a briefing with agricultural ministers from around the world. They understood that fighting nature leads to failure. Working with natural rhythms ensures survival. The breakthrough came when Marcus's team successfully decoded what they termed the Great Cycle calculations, astronomical observations that tracked climate patterns over periods spanning thousands of years. The ancient knowledge keepers had identified recurring cycles of warming and cooling, dry and wet periods that operated on timescales far longer than modern agricultural planning considered. They weren't just farmers, Marcus explained during a presentation to the Global Food Security Council. They were ecosystem managers who planned agricultural strategies across generations, accounting for climate variations that might not manifest for centuries. Sophia's work had evolved beyond documentary making. Working with the MIT Media Lab, she had developed an AI system that could interpret the symbolic language of the ancient sites and translate environmental predictions into actionable agricultural recommendations. The amazing thing, Sophia shared during a TED Talk that would be viewed by over 50 million people, is that the ancient peoples solved problems we're just now recognizing. They created regenerative agricultural systems that actually improved soil health over time, managed water resources sustainably, and maintained biodiversity while feeding large populations. The practical applications began appearing worldwide. In drought-stricken regions of Africa, farmers implementing the decoded ancient techniques saw crop yields increase by 40% while using 60% less water. In flood-prone areas of Southeast Asia, the ancient-inspired terracing and drainage systems protected harvests that would have been lost to traditional methods. The success stories multiplied. Indigenous communities in the Amazon, working with researchers trained at Millfield, developed crop rotation systems based on the astronomical calculations that restored depleted soil while increasing food production. Farmers in Australia used the ancient techniques to create carbon-sequestering agricultural systems that actually reversed soil degradation. Rebecca traveled constantly, speaking at conferences, consulting with governments, and helping establish training centers where the ancient techniques could be taught to modern farmers. The irony wasn't lost on her. The knowledge that had been dismissed as primitive superstition was now being recognized as the most advanced, sustainable agriculture humanity had ever developed. "You know what I've learned?" Rebecca told a gathering of world leaders at the Davos Economic Forum. "Progress isn't always about moving forward. Sometimes it's about going back to wisdom we lost along the way. The ancient peoples weren't less advanced than us. They were advanced in ways we forgot." The seventh year brought an even more profound revelation. Dr. Chen's team in China had discovered that the global network of ancient sites wasn't just about preservation, it was about active environmental management. The sites were positioned to monitor and influence global weather patterns through what the ancient peoples had somehow understood about atmospheric and magnetic field interactions. They didn't just predict climate changes, Dr. Chen explained during a massive international video conference linking research teams from every continent. They had some method of influencing them. The sites aren't just observatories, they're part of a planetary climate management system. This discovery led to the most ambitious project in human history, the Global Resonance Initiative. Teams began working to understand how the ancient sites might be reactivated to help stabilize current climate disruption. It sounded like science fiction, but the mathematics and engineering evidence were undeniable. Marcus led the theoretical research team, attempting to understand the physics behind the ancient climate management system. "We're looking at principles that combine quantum mechanics, atmospheric science, and consciousness research in ways that challenge our fundamental understanding of how reality works," he explained to a gathering of Nobel laureates. Sophia focused on the human element, working with indigenous communities worldwide to understand how different cultures had maintained connections to the site network. Her research revealed that many shamanic and spiritual traditions contained encoded instructions for operating what she termed planetary healing technologies. The ancient peoples understood something we're just rediscovering, Sophia shared during a presentation to the World Economic Forum. Consciousness and physical reality aren't separate. The sites were designed to be operated through focused human intention, combined with precise astronomical timing. The first test activation occurred on the winter solstice of their 8th year at Millfield. Teams at sites around the world synchronized their efforts, following protocols decoded from the ancient instructions. Rebecca stood in the central chamber, surrounded by her children, researchers, tribal elders, and scientists from every field imaginable. As the moment of precise astronomical alignment approached, Rebecca felt an energy she couldn't describe building in the chamber. The metallic inlays in the walls seemed to emit a faint hum, and the air itself felt charged with possibility. "Whatever happens," Rebecca said, looking around the circle of faces illuminated by the chamber's ancient star map, "we're doing exactly what the knowledge keepers intended. We're not just preserving their wisdom, we're completing their work." The activation worked. Satellite data showed subtle but measurable changes in atmospheric conditions across the network of sites, weather patterns that had been destabilizing. For months, suddenly stabilized. The effect was small but real, proof that the ancient technology could influence planetary systems. Over the following years, as more sites were brought online and the techniques refined, the impact became undeniable. Global food security improved dramatically as farmers worldwide adopted the integrated ancient modern agricultural methods. Climate stability increased as more nodes in the planet management network came online. Rebecca watched her children grow into leaders of this unprecedented global transformation. Marcus established the Institute for Planetary Harmonics, dedicated to understanding and refining the consciousness technology interface the ancients had developed. Sophia founded the Global Heritage Activation Project, working with indigenous communities to responsibly restore ancient sites worldwide. "We've become something I never imagined," Rebecca reflected during a quiet moment on the farmhouse porch. Now in her 50s, she had been recognized with every major humanitarian award, served as an advisor to the United Nations, and been invited to speak at institutions around the world. But her greatest pride wasn't in the accolades or the global impact. It was in watching her children carry forward a legacy that connected the deepest past to the brightest possible future. Marcus had married Dr. Yuki Tanaka and was raising children who could switch between quantum physics equations and ancient star maps with equal ease. Sophia had partnered with a climate scientist from Kenya, and together they were developing the next generation of planetary healing technologies. The 10th anniversary of Sophia's discovery was marked by a global celebration unlike anything the world had ever seen. For 24 hours, as the anniversary moment traveled around the world with the sun, each of the 144 activated ancient sites held ceremonies connecting their local communities to the global network. Rebecca stood once again on the spot where she'd first seen the property, but now she wasn't alone. Millions of people around the world were standing at their own ancient sites, all connected by technologies and wisdom that bridged thousands of years and every culture on Earth. "When I bought this farm for $300, Rebecca spoke to the gathered crowd and the global audience watching via satellite, "I thought I was just trying to survive another day. I had no idea I was stepping into a story that connected every human who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was possible." The audience, a mixture of world leaders, indigenous elders, Nobel laureates, farmers, students and families, listened as she continued. The ancient peoples who preserved their knowledge here taught us the most important lesson of all. We are not separate from each other or from the planet we share. We are part of a continuing story, temporary custodians of wisdom that belongs to all time. Dr. Blackhorse, now in her 80s but still sharp and vital, raised her hand to speak. Rebecca, your family didn't just discover an archaeological site. You rediscovered what it means to be human, to think beyond our individual lifetimes, to preserve knowledge for futures we'll never see, to trust that wisdom shared across differences makes us all stronger. As the ceremony continued into the night, with traditional dances and songs from every continent, Rebecca felt the profound satisfaction of a life that had found its purpose. The desperate choice that had seemed like last resort had become the first step toward humanity's next evolutionary leap. The farm that had cost $300 had generated billions in agricultural innovations, climate solutions, and technological advances. But its real value couldn't be measured in money. It had proved that ancient wisdom could solve modern problems, that diversity of knowledge created strength, and that the most extraordinary destinies often emerged from the most ordinary circumstances. Elder White Elk, now 98 and still visiting the site regularly, spoke the words that would be remembered long after the celebration ended. The Star Keepers knew this day would come. They preserved their gift, not just for their own people, but for all people. Today, we complete the circle they began so long ago. As shooting stars traced across the Nebraska sky, now monitored by a global network of ancient and modern technologies working in harmony, Rebecca understood that their story wasn't ending. It was transforming, like everything alive, into something new while honoring everything that had come before. The woman who had bought a worthless farm with her last dollar had helped humanity remember its greatest truth. We are all connected, across time and space, all part of one continuing story of consciousness exploring itself through countless lives and countless discoveries. The knowledge keepers had trusted the future. Their trust had been rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. And now it was time for Rebecca's generation to become ancestors themselves, preserving and expanding the gift for whatever challenges and wonders lay ahead. The stars wheeled overhead, unchanged in their courses, still keeping perfect time as they had for the ancient astronomers and would for countless generations yet to come. Some truths, Rebecca realized, transcend time itself. The truth that wisdom preserved becomes wisdom multiplied, that courage in the face of impossible odds can transform everything, and that sometimes the most valuable discoveries are hidden in the places everyone else has given up on. The cursed farm had become blessed ground, not through magic but through the much greater miracle of human determination, wisdom, and love. The single mother who had risked everything on what everyone said was worthless land had found something priceless, proof that no matter how lost we feel, no matter how impossible our circumstances seem, we're all part of a story much larger and more wonderful than we can imagine. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.